revolution happened, as industrial revolution happened, whole set of new technologies were built. As soon as people discovered, the chip, there are a whole set of technologies that are getting developed on top of it. So, and the communication, the internet is just, anything that gets innovated in one part of the world, it's everywhere instantly. And hence, the rate of innovation is only going to accelerate and, get to hyperspeed. Truly, if I look at, I can see what the world will be for next 20, 30 years, but beyond that, it's hard to even imagine what the technology will look like and how fast we'll be moving.
Hi, Naresh. I'd like to say that, I'd worked at Adobe this year as a research intern in Bangalore, and it was, I'd just like to say that it was a great experience.
Thank you.
To work there. And I recommend everyone to apply there and everything. But I worked on the digital marketing part of the research that was going on over there, and I had this question that we see a lot of hype around big data and data analytics these days. So I just wanted to know your opinion about how much of this, how much of the attention that it's getting is legitimate, or how much of it is just a hype. And
well, almost always hype comes because there is some reality to it. Now, what you have to ask is hype beyond what is going to happen, or it's kind of, big data is real. See, from data you can extract a lot of information and make critical business decisions that will have beneficial impact. Now, will big data or data, because I think big is just a word that was invented by some large company to sell their servers and data storage systems. Ultimately, it's about data, right? Is data useful? Oh hell yes, data is useful. Can you make meaningful decisions from data? Yes. Do you need large amount of data to get meaningful discussion, insight? And the answer is depends. There are situations where small amount of data will give you deep insight, and there are situations where large amount of data will give you deep insight. The general feeling is that large amount of data will allow you to uncover patterns and get insights that you otherwise cannot. But I have no doubt that the use of data has significant positive impact on companies and society in general, and hence it will continue to be there. Many failed experiments will be there. There will be a period where people will say it hasn't lived up to hype, but then almost every technology goes through that hype cycle. But it's a real thing. Right? Should we, one more question, just last one.
Last question.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, currently all our computers are electronic. How close or how far are we from computers which not use electronic circuits or possibly polymer or biological systems?
I don't know. Biological computing, it's already happening. Means all of us are standing here, we are all biological computer at one level, right? So biological computing is for us to see all around us. Now, polymer, I just don't know. Sorry. I haven't read, I read, but I haven't read that much. I don't know.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. There are a few words which Munshi sir would want to speak.
Oh, I just wanted to add that he was a bleary-eyed kid in 1984 when he came. And did I try to rag you then? And I was his faculty counselor. So it's a great privilege and honor for me to be here and listen to him, how to succeed in life. And he mentioned Malcolm Gladwell. I just read that book recently in one of those long flights.
Yeah.
Marvelous. I think all of you should read that book. Okay.
And that book is about nurture versus nature. And he says, you need to have some talent, but if you really want to be world class, you have to spend 10,000 hours practicing it. So go and practice 10,000 hours of your startup, of your software or metallurgy engineering or whatever, and you'll be world class. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll continue the e-speak with Mrs. Meera Sanyal's talk. So I request all of you to continue be seated.
Hello.
We will start the Meera Sanyal's talk by just another 10 minutes, so please be tuned. And,
carrying forward the e-Speak organized by Techkriti in association with the Entrepreneurship Shell. Our next speaker is Mrs. Meera Sanyal. Mrs. Meera Sanyal is the former CEO and chairman of Royal Bank of Scotland in India. She was involved in banking for more than 30 years before stepping down for RBS to stand for as the Aam Aadmi Party candidate in South Mumbai in the 2014 Lok Sabha election. She serves as a non-executive director on the board of Pradhan, an Indian NGO that works to empower women through entrepreneurship, and on the international board of Right to Play, a global organization that helped over 1 million children through the transformative power of play. She is the former chairperson of the Indian Advisory Board, ISEC, the world's largest student organization. The business of government is governance, not business. This is one of the guiding values of Mrs. Sanyal. She relinquished her job to devote herself full-time to the service of our country. So let's give their hands together for Mrs. Meera Sanyal.
Thank you, Ankur, and a very good afternoon to all of you. It's a real pleasure for me to be here at IIT Kanpur today for a variety of reasons. One is several of your distinguished alumni have been friends and people whom I admire greatly. Of course, there's Mr. Narayan Murthy, whom we all know. I've had the privilege of working very closely with him in my banking career, with him, of course, in his role at Infosys. But also other people like Satyendra Dubey, your very famous alumnus, who I think has set hallmark for what activism can be. Of course, Dr. Subbarao, who was governor of the Reserve Bank and with whom I worked very closely, Som Mittal, president of NASCOM, and of course, one of your younger alumni, Nandan, who is with me in Aam Aadmi Party as one of the people who has journeyed with us on this path. So as I said, it's really wonderful to be here with you. And when I was invited by your colleagues to be at this festival, I said, well, what would people like to hear? And they said to me, well, you know, you can talk about banking, you can talk about politics, you can really talk about both of them together. And so what I want to share with you today is why I believe banking matters, why I believe politics matters, and most importantly, why I believe you matter. And that's what I would like to spend a few minutes talking about. And then if there's still time, we can have some questions and answers. So I'd like to start by asking you if you are planning to live and work in India after you finish your studies, your engineering studies. That is fantastic. I'm really so happy to see so many hands. And the second question I'd like to ask is, please raise your hand if you are planning to start your own enterprise, to be an entrepreneur when you finish your engineering studies. So not as many hands, but still a great deal. And you know, before we do anything, please give yourselves a big round of applause. Because I can tell you that this show of hands was certainly not the case when I was a student, and it was not even the case as recently as 5, 6, 7 years ago. And what you represent, I believe, is a new India, an India which is really changing for the better. So I'd like to just share a little bit about my story and then lead into the topics that I talked about. I'm the daughter of a naval officer, and there are two things associated with that. The first is that I grew up in a very idealistic family. My father was a very idealistic person. He's no longer with us. My mother is a very brilliant lawyer. She never practiced. She always said she'd invested her education in us, my brother and myself. And the two things that marked our childhood was, first, we moved a lot of schools. So someone was asking me, one of your colleagues, they said, where did you go to school? And it was almost everywhere. So every few years we changed schools, and that was, I think, a very nice thing, because the consequences that you have friends really across the country and across everywhere. But the other thread which ran through our childhood was, I remember my father telling us almost constantly that we had to grow up and serve our country. And for many years I struggled with that. I didn't really know how I would serve my country, but it was at the back of my mind. And then when we were sitting in the green room and sitting around, I was asking your friends what they would do when they graduated, or why they had chosen engineering, why they'd chosen to come to IIT Kanpur. And the answers I heard reminded me a lot of myself when I was a student. I knew what I didn't want to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I chose the options that I believed would leave me the maximum amount of choice. And I wasn't as brilliant as all of you, so I couldn't choose engineering. But I tried to, choose a field which would leave those options open. And so I chose commerce, and then I went on and did my MBA, initially at IIM Calcutta, and then I dropped out of there and I went abroad to INSEAD. And in those days, and this goes back many years, I graduated in 1983. And when I finished, the one thing I knew I did want to do was I did want to come back to India. But going back to those days, and this is probably the generation of your parents, I found that was a very hard thing to do. So INSEAD in those days, as it is now, is recognized as a good business school. And so I had job offers. I had a job offer in France, I had a job offer in Sweden, and they were both good jobs, and I would have been quite happy doing either of those things. One, in fact, was in a I would say, engineering manufacturing company called Electrolux. The other was in banking in the BNP. But I said, no, I'd like to go back to India and see, and work there. And as I said, this was incredibly hard because, of course, in India in those days, nobody went to France to do an MBA. Of course, you went to America. And so as I started going for interviews, people said, oh, you went to France to study French. And I said, no. They said, oh, you must have gone to study art. And I said, no. And then when I'd say I'd gone to study management, they'd look at you and say, oh, who is this crazy person? Why go to France? And then they'd said, okay, why are you here? And I said, I've come, for a job. And then you could sense in their eyes, this person is such a loser. Who comes back to India? Because in those days you had really a lot of people going abroad, but nobody ever wanted to come back because there was not a lot to come back to. It took me about 6 months to find a job. And finally, the way I did it, I went back to IIM Cal. IIM Cal is a 2-year program. INSEAD was a 1-year intensive program. And I went to the dean, who was a wonderful gentleman by the name of Ramu Iyer. And I said, sir, I'm really struggling. And in that weekend, I still remember, about 80% of my batch got placed. And I said, I've made a very big mistake. If I had wanted to live and work in India, I should have stayed on here. But he was a very generous man. He said, yes, Meera, why don't you come and, finish your MBA here? And I said, no, sir, 1 MBA is enough. I certainly don't want 2. So he says, what do you want? I said, can I please put on my CV that I am 19th PGDM of IIM Cal? And he said, yes, of course, because you are 19th PGDM of IIM Cal. The batch hadn't passed out, I hadn't passed out, so he said, you can do that. And that's how I got my first interview calls. And that's how I was then offered a few jobs. And one of them was a job with Grindlays Bank, and that's how I became a banker. So I guess there are some of you here who are accidental engineers. I can certainly tell you, I'm an accidental banker. And so I started my banking career in 1984, and I gave it up exactly 30 years later. But during my banking career, I learned one thing. And as I said, that is that banking matters. Why does it matter? It matters because banking is the lifeblood of an economic system. And I believe that if bankers do their jobs properly, And what is their job? Their job is to help other people make money. That is the fundamental job of a banker. You provide the ability to an entrepreneur or someone who's saving or someone who has assets to use that money in a productive way to produce more goods and services to help the economy run better. Would you agree with that? That's what the basic job of a banker is. And somewhere down the line, I think banking took a different turn. Lots of engineers in banking, lots of financial engineering in banking. And I saw the golden age of banking, and I also saw the worst days of banking. When I took over as CEO of RBS in India, I think banks were masters of the universe. Those were the days of multi-million-dollar bonuses, not just in Wall Street, but also in India. And then we had the global financial crisis. And, I don't want to dwell a lot on that because I'm sure you're all well aware of it. But I think the global financial crisis really came about for a very simple reason. And that reason was that the people who were involved in the banking and financial services industry lost sight of their basic purpose. Instead of helping other people make money, they started to focus on how they would maximize the money they made themselves. The focus became on bonuses, how to maximize bonuses, and a lot of very big mistakes were made. Mistakes in financial engineering, whether you look at the subprime crisis, mistake on ethics, which is why you have multi-billion-dollar fines, mistakes on mis-selling, really mistakes in a variety of ways, which shows that bankers had lost their way. Of course, someone asked them, why did you enter politics? And so I fast forward to the year 2008. As I said, this is the year which in my life it was a very significant year for two reasons. One is I had just taken over my bank, which was ABN AMRO Bank, had just been bought by the Royal Bank of Scotland. And the combination of the two banks created the largest bank in the world. It was such a big bank that it was bigger than the next smaller bank by 60%. So we were a global giant. The deal was done, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but the way the deal was done was almost an all-cash deal. RBS leveraged up its balance sheet just before the financial crisis. So in and of itself, it was not a bad acquisition, but the timing was fatal. And when the financial crisis hit, to have so much leverage on the books of RBS, we really saw the entire thing unraveling. As I said, I had just taken over as CEO, and much of what I had done in my banking career, applying the rules of what my dad had told me, I struggled through the years and said, all right, how do I serve my country? So let me make sure that at least the projects that I finance are good for our country. And there is something which is called the Equator Principles that ABN AMRO was a founder of, but RBS was also a subscriber to, which said that every project we finance will meet certain ethical, social, and environmental norms, what we call the ESG filters. And those are actually very good guidelines, and I felt that they held us in good stead. And I felt very privileged during the course of my career to have been part of the financing of India's telecoms, the power sector, the oil and gas sector, and that was wonderful. And during those years, we also had the opportunity to create a BPO and ITES company. And so for ABN AMRO and RBS, I had set up the global BPO, which at the time when I stepped down employed 14,000 people in India, servicing the entire world. So when we were looking at the banking crisis, my job was to keep the Indian ship afloat. And so I was working my way through that. And then on the 26th of November, we had the terrorist attacks in Mumbai. And in many ways, that to me was, I think it was for many people a very life-changing event. But certainly for me, I remember sitting in my room watching what was happening. And of course, we were invoking our business continuity and disaster protocols, just to give you an idea On the day of the attack, I was not in Mumbai. I was actually in Delhi. And there was some award ceremony of a confederation of NGOs. It was at Rajghat. And they were giving me an award. And after that, with my family, any of you from Delhi here? Okay, so you know this wonderful restaurant Kareem's in Old Delhi. So we had gone as a family to Delhi. My parents were in Delhi, and so I'd gone along with them. And my phone was on silent. So as I stepped out of the restaurant at 10:30, and it's a very crowded restaurant, I looked at my phone and I saw over 100 missed calls from the office, from the house, and I knew that something was happening. And then, you know, we gradually were trying to figure out right through the night actually the impact of what it was. And we have very significant operations in Mumbai. We have, of course, branches, but we also had a big, all our investment banking for the whole world was actually being processed out of Mumbai. We had 40 foreigners in the city, most of them staying at the Oberoi and the Taj. Fortunately, not a lot of them were in the hotels at that time. 5 people were trapped there. 14 of my staff were trapped in my office, which was just behind the Oberoi, etc. And so through the night we were working, and by 6 o'clock in the morning, all our 2,500 people in Mumbai were accounted for. We knew they were safe. We knew their families were safe. We knew where the foreigners were. We knew who was in the hotel. We knew who was in the office. We knew that 4 Canadian tourists had fled from the Oberoi, had taken refuge in our office. And this was not unusual. I think most companies who have business continuity protocols would have been in the same situation. But the situation in the public domain was completely different. You must, many of you, does any of you remember 26/11? Yeah? You must have been quite young at that time, but it was horrific. And I compared to what we saw during the 9/11 attacks on New York. You know, terrorism is a bad thing and it can happen everywhere. But what you can control is your response to it. And if you recall the way, you were even younger, but Mayor Giuliani in New York, he had taken control of the situation. They knew what was happening. They knew it was a very bad thing that was happening, but they were controlling the situation. Regrettably, in Mumbai, there was no one in charge. The chief minister wasn't in charge. The mayor certainly wasn't in charge. The sheriff wasn't in charge. The municipal commissioner wasn't in charge. The police commissioner wasn't in charge. There was complete chaos. And I could not fly back from Delhi to Mumbai because the airports had been closed, so we were sitting and managing on the phone. And as I was sitting with my father, he said to me, you know, there was one very horrific moment where our commandos were going down, you know, on helicopter over Shabad House. And this was being broadcast live on television. And he said, what are they doing? Because the people sitting inside obviously could have access to a television. Our men are sitting ducks. Later, you know, in the day, I was talking to my people, my staff who were trapped in the office, and as I said, it was just behind the Oberoi. It was my head of treasury there, and I remember I was speaking to them every hour, and they were taking it very well, they were being very mature. But at one stage, this head of treasury was a very good guy. He broke down, he was crying on the phone. He said, Meera, I can't take it anymore. And I said, what has happened? I mean, calm down. And he says, I can see the people in the Oberoi because, you know, the terrorists had started setting fire to the rooms and the rooms were filling with smoke. And he said, I can see these people banging on the windows. And I said, okay, calm down, call the fire engine. And he said, I have called the fire engine. And I said, well, then what's happening? He said, the fire engine is parked around the corner. And I said, well, why aren't they coming forward? And he says, because there's no one in charge. They don't have permission to move. So this was the situation in Mumbai, which is actually a very efficient city. The police is very efficient. The administration is very efficient. But nobody was talking to each other. It wasn't being well managed. There was no leadership. And at that point, on that day, I said that I am no longer going to be a spectator. I'm not going to sit in my drawing room and watch these TV shows and analyze and criticize. I'm going to be part of the system because the system needs to change, and if we believe we can change the system, then we must enter it. And so I made the decision at that time to enter politics and to stand for elections. Now, of course, in 2009, this was a very crazy thing to do because nobody joined politics. I mean, nobody who was not a son or a daughter of a politician, nobody who was not a film star or a celebrity, nobody who was not a criminal. These were the categories of people who used to go into politics. And so when I said I'm going to stand for elections, this was, people just said, you're completely crazy. I mean, who does this kind of thing? Politics is for criminals, politics is for people who are corrupt. Why are you doing this? In fact, our governor, Raghuram Rajan, has written a lovely book called Fault Lines. I do recommend any of you who are interested in the banking world, economy, etc., do read it. But tucked away in the appendix at the back, he talks about the crazy banker who entered politics. And so when I met him when he took over as governor, I said, hi, I'm that crazy person. But it was really regarded as a very crazy thing to do. What I'm really happy about is that now in 2013 and 14, it has become a very mainstream thing. That in 5 years, the needle of public opinion has shifted, that people like Nandan Nilekani, people like Jayant Sinha, and I hope one day people like you will take the step to enter electoral politics, not for the power, not for the money, but to serve your country. Because politics matters. Just as banking matters, politics matters. And I believe the reason that is so, and let's not talk about politics and politicians, but let's say why do politics and politicians exist? It is for governance. And the job of government and governance, I believe, is to create the enabling circumstances so that normal, ordinary people can live in safety, can go about their lives and fulfill their potential. Just as bankers have lost their way, I believe politics and politicians have lost their way. Instead of focusing on their prime task, which is to create those enabling circumstances for the people of that city or that country, politicians regrettably, and not just in India, I think everywhere in the world, have started focusing like bankers on enriching themselves, but also their unitary focus has become on getting re-elected. And I think that's one of the reasons that politicians and politics have lost their way. But it doesn't take away from the basic tenets of what I believe, that just as banking matters for an economy to flourish, politics matters for an economy, for a people, for a nation to flourish. But as I said, there were 3 aspects to it. And the third is, the most important thing is that you matter. And you really made me so happy by your show of hands, because if people like you invest your future in this country, and invest, so many of you intend to invest your future in becoming entrepreneurs, then India is in safe hands. Now I will tell you another story. As a child, as a family, we traveled a lot. We often took road trips, we often took, of course, train trips. And I remember, when the great famine of 69-70 was taking place, going by train from Mumbai to Delhi, Bombay as it was then called. And I have never forgotten that memory, because at station after station, trains were just packed with people, on the roof, out, hanging out of the doors, hanging out of the windows. People were just fleeing. It was just terrible. And as we were going past, you could see skeletons on the sides of the track. And my brother, who's 4 years older than me, he used to, tease me, and he would say, oh, those are human skeletons. I don't believe that. Was probably, cattle. But it was a horrific thing. Right? And that image has stayed with me all my life. I often asked myself, when will that time come for India, like it came for the United States after the Great Depression, like it came for Japan after the World War, when you have that massive explosion of wealth and opportunity which allows a nation to move forward. And I believe that time is now for India. We are entering the golden age of this country. We may not have this opportunity for a very long time, and we haven't had it for several hundred years. What we talk about in terms of our demographic dividend. Now is the time that that can yield a dividend. When you have your productivity ratios which are favorable, when you have this large group of talented brains and minds, not just in the IITs, but across the country, who are capable and wanting to do things. This is that time for India. But it will not last forever. This demographic dividend can become a demographic nightmare. I believe the signs that we see of increasing violence on the streets of this country, particularly violence against women, is a sign that the 1 million people who enter our workforce every month are not finding creative or productive avenues for them to employ their energies. And so this could go very, very badly, or it could go very, very well. My hope and prayer is that it goes very well. And in the hands of young people like yourself, that is our best chance. So I want to stop here, and I want to really ask you to make 3 promises. Take 3 pledges. The first is, be job creators, not job seekers. Create, we had that beautiful slogan, each one teach one. I think we need to convert that into each one employ one. Being an entrepreneur, in my mind, should be the best, most noble profession, because you create the potential for someone else to lead a life of dignity in addition to creating goods and services. So really, those of you who are thinking of enterprise either now or later, dil khol karke kar lo, bahut achhi cheez hai. Really do it well. The second, to the extent possible, because I know that there will be great opportunities for many of you abroad, by all means go abroad. But whatever you can do in whichever way, do come back, or don't come back, but find a way to serve India, because this country needs you. And this country needs you now more than ever. And the third is, widen your horizon of what it means to live in a smarter world. The theme of Techkriti this year is Blueprint for a Smarter World. Being engineers, I think, you probably immediately think of high-tech and Wi-Fi and...
What I wanted to ask is, he is the minister, I am not asking a question about Jayant Sinha, but I am asking a question that even though there has been changes in politics, but I don't see any kind of changes. For example, I would like to mention the amount of budget which is allocated to education in India. So why do you think that these particular things like budget allocation in health, education are not changing with time? Rather than the change in politics is something like the young youth are getting crazy about politics. We want to enter politics, but we don't have...
You're IIT Kanpur?
Yes, ma'am.
Which field?
Ma'am, I am doing BTech in civil engineering and also doing double majors in economics.
if we start
Go ahead, Vivek. Sorry.
Yeah, should I continue?
Yes, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So I was just talking about, like, we see, we feel, we analyze, still we get befooled by our politicians. So and we have seen the rise of half in the recent politics, but we're not able to see much, ventures or startups coming in this political scenario or political aspects. One example is ADR, that is doing pretty well in this sector. If we start, if we plan and launch a company or venture which go to people, educate them about the politics, about their, power of vote, and not only that, what exactly one need for a good governance, that AAP is trying to do at the, central level. That is good. But if we, if person start, launching venture and going in this sector, so what would be your opinion for that, and what kind of, how exactly one should execute this so as to make this, revolution more enlightened?
So, I'll say two things. First of all is there's a bit of a myth in our country that people need to be educated about politics or about governance. I think the Indian people know better than anyone else how to choose good leaders. And we've seen two very fine examples of that. In the Lok Sabha election, you saw an absolute mandate for Prime Minister Modi. And I think the people across the country voted for that because they wanted jobs, they wanted progress, they wanted more wealth, they wanted more prosperity, which I think was, they wanted decision making, they wanted all of that. In the Delhi elections, we once again saw an absolute majority because people have said, we want a different type of politics, we want more inclusive politics, we want good governance, we want anti-corruption, etc. Right? And I think that's something we should really, especially if you're in the political space, a little bit of humility is called for. We all think that we know better. Actually, janta sab kuch janti hai. That's very, very true. There's no question. Now, if you want to make a business proposition in the political space, which is what I've understood your question to be, I think it's like any other business. You have to say, is there a market for my product? And what are people willing to pay for that product? Remember, business is always a combination of the two things. Otherwise, it becomes charity. If you're making something for which there's a market and you're giving it away for free, then there's not a business. So you have to decide where you are. And a lot of people, of course, have gone into the NGO space. But I think a very interesting intersection, in fact, of working with Dr. Manmohan Singh when he was finance minister, etc. And India has changed. Don't underestimate the amount by which India has changed. It's changed in a dramatic way. And give you an example. When my husband and I got married, we applied for a phone. In those days, to get a phone, you had to pay bribes. मैं तभी भी बहुत आदर्शवादी थी. मैंने कहा नहीं, pay नहीं करेंगे. So we waited for 10 years. Then we got transferred to Singapore. And on the day we were leaving the house, the letter of allotment came. Took us 10 years to get a phone. Now think of where we are today. India is the most dynamic telecom market anywhere in the world. I've spent a lot of my time, traveling, through the villages. We have a big microfinance program we had. And across this country, the penetration of mobile telephony is 95%. Every village in the remotest part, whether it is Ladakh, whether it is Kanyakumari, people have phones, right? So this country has changed. And one of the reasons why I've enjoyed banking is that banking is so integrally connected with the economy, right? In the early days, as the economy was liberalizing, I was very much a part of that. Then we had the big project finance, as I said, of telecoms and power and oil and gas, and was part of that. Then came, how do we look, as you see, I'm very passionate about enterprise, particularly women's empowerment. So we learned from the Bangladesh example of Mohammed Yunus. We started a microfinance, very big microfinance program. At one stage, ABN AMRO was a quarter of the market. We financed over 6.5 lakh women. I set up this BPO. So I was, if you like, I was not an entrepreneur, but I was an intrapreneur within the bank. And the Dutch were very smart. They allowed us to do this. So I had a lot of freedom to do the things I enjoyed. And as a consequence, I stayed in banking. And I'm still very much connected with banking. I was just at lunch with Christian Lagarde from the IMF just earlier this week. And that's my training. I mean, I think when you enter politics, and this really goes to, you have to bring something with you. Bring your skills as an engineer, as a doctor, as a lawyer, as a banker, as a teacher. Because this is not child's play. This is a very complex, big country. If you want to make a difference, you have to make a difference in a tangible and concrete way. And we have to change things. And you can only change them when you have the experience and the knowledge of something. Doesn't matter what it is, but it needs to be something. So I haven't abandoned banking, but I am no longer a full-time banker. Let me put it that way.
Good evening, ma'am. My name is Rahul and I'm a first year student here. As being a banker for 30 years and then shifting to politics, you have experience in both the fields. My question to you is, what is your message as a politician for the bankers and as a banker for the politicians?
I think, Rahul, it would be very much what I said. I mean, as a politician to the bankers, particularly Indian bankers, I would say, first of all, run your banks professionally. I think one of the big problems in Indian banking has been that the state-owned banks have stopped taking independent decisions. If you look at the banking sector at the moment, the non-performing assets are now close to 10 or 11% of the entire asset book. That's very, very high. And that's not because the bankers in the PSU banks are not professional. They are some of the finest bankers in the world. But a lot of, well, let me put it bluntly, a lot of politics has corrupted the banking sector. You know, someone calls up and says, isko loan deo, usko loan deo. And it's, you know, whether it's the farm loan waivers which have been written off, whether it is the lending to companies like Kingfisher which has been written off. I mean, all of this it's bad economics and it's bad politics. I can tell you there is not a farmer in India who has benefited from these farm loan waivers. All this money has got siphoned off in some way or the other. And the farmers of India are the most credit-worthy people. They are hardworking, they are enterprising, they are innovative. They don't want any charity, right? But we are creating a culture where, I mean, I'll give you an example. I'd gone to a small village. You know, I travel a lot, and they were saying, come and open a branch here. I said, why? Because we do a lot of work in self-help groups. I said, why? You can get a loan from the self-help group. The answer was, nahi, agar bank se loan milta hai, to usko wapas paise nahi dene padte hain. So we have corrupted the credit culture, right? So from a politician to a banker, I would say, have the courage to stand up for what you believe in, do the right thing. I think, for example, Arundhati Bhattacharya of State Bank of India is a prime example of really good banking. And she's really moving the needle, doing great stuff. So that's what I would say as a politician. From bankers to politicians, I would say the reverse. Please stop interfering in what we are doing. Let us focus and let's do what is important. Because if we don't get this right, I mean, if the banks of India go sick, we will not be able to see this global change, this mega trend which is coming to improve India.
Thank you. So we will taking the last question. So if anyone has, please raise your hand.
Hello, good evening, ma'am. I'm Ankit Wadhwa from Economics Department, final year at IIT Kanpur. I wanted to ask, I mean, you just told if you want to get into electoral politics, then, I mean, first make your fortune, then if you are able to support yourself, then only enter electoral politics. Or the other option is, I mean, just thrive on the paychecks of your parents. So, I mean, if after making a fortune, I get into politics, won't there be any questions asked towards me that now you've quenched your thirst for the greediness for money, now you're asking for, I mean, power. So, I mean, like in your case, I mean, with all due respect, I don't mean to offend you or, I mean, accuse you. Like, you had been in banking for 30 years. So the golden age, I mean, when you were getting like 100% bonuses, and the timing got difficult, like in the 2009, all the bonuses wrapped up. So you decided at that point to enter into politics. So weren't there any accusations on you, was it just the bad timing?
It's a really great question, Adit. So let me say this. The first is, I'm not saying make your fortune, but have enough to support yourself. If enough to support yourself is a Ferrari and a helicopter, then do it. But do it on your own merit rather than trying to get it out of politics. That's all I was saying. But you must be able to have enough. Because see, electoral politics is like this. It's a binary switch position. This is now being have a reason because of this binary Ramdhanda. So certainly and I very difficult time. As I said, we have 14,000 people. The bank was bleeding. I returned India to profit. We had the best scores. We were the best rated bank by the Reserve Bank of India. And when I felt the bank was in a stable footing, I made sure that my successors, both excellent colleagues of mine, are able to run the bank flawlessly and taking it ahead. Unfortunately, RBS is exiting countries across the world, and I've just heard that India is one of the countries they will be exiting. But at the time I left RBS, on the 31st of December 2013, India was the best performing country in the RBS group and one of the best performing banks in India. It's only after that that I left them. You have to give him a mic.
No, what I'm asking is, me being wealthy, would it affect any, would it have any effect on the outcome of the elections I'm contesting in? Because people might conceive that I'm greedy of power because I've already made money. So in my first elections, when I've already made my fortune through other means, like from the banks, and now I'm entering politics. So won't people perceive me that I'm greedy of power, and that's why I'm entering politics, and that's why I might lose?
I suppose it depends on you. Remember that I've entered politics and I've lost 2 elections, right? So, the point is that I'm still here. And one of the things I did, great thing about standing and losing once is you're prepared for the next time. So this time I said, whether I win or lose, these are the things I'm going to do in my constituency. I sent out 5 lakh flyers to my voters. And the day after the election results, I have stuck with it. So for example, a big campaign of mine, for those of you who are from Mumbai who are interested in it, is the Portlands of Mumbai. And we have managed to force Nitin Gadkari to say he will redevelop the Portlands. They're now trying to, the builder politician lobby is trying to extract that. And I'm standing there like a rock and saying, no, this will go back to the city of Mumbai. So remember, electoral politics in India is about winning and losing an election. But politics is not about that. You can make a difference. You can make that difference now, Aditya. You don't have to stand for an election to make a difference to your country. But if you are going to stand for an election, all I'm saying, and the fortune is a different story. Be able to support yourself, because otherwise people will point a finger at you and say, isne paise khaye hain. Nahi to how is he running his house? You understand? That is the problem with, does anyone here trust politicians? Please raise your hand if you trust politicians. See, this speaks for itself. Nobody trusts politicians because they say sab chor hai. Right? The only way not to be called a chore is if you don't need to do chori. You understand? That's the problem.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am, for the inspiring talk. I'm sure everybody would have get something to learn. We will continue with another session with Mr. Dileep Chhabaria. So please be seated.
Please be seated. We'll be starting with talk of Dileep Chhabaria, Ace Transportation Designer, in 5 minutes.
उनको पकड़ना भी नहीं पड़ेगा।
आप इसको लगा दीजिए, यहाँ पे एक चेयर लगा दीजिए।
और यहाँ पर जो अनाउंस करेगा,
हाँ मैं हैंड में यूज़ कर लूँगी, चलो।
और चार्जिंग पे सामने लगा देगा। हाँ लगा देना उसको, आप चार्जिंग पे सामने से लगा दो, सही होगा। आप तो बोलोगे हमसे नहीं हुआ भैया। यहाँ पर बैठ जाएंगे, इससे बोलते रहेंगे, इससे नेक्स्ट करते रहेंगे।
वो आएंगे ना, बता देना कि ये दोनों फाइल में बनती।
हाँ
एक कॉर्पोरेट का डिज़ाइन
और एक कॉर्पोरेट।
अभी ये मिरर कर रखा है।
Well, the presentation is in two structures. First of all, I will talk of what DC design is all about. I mean, one of the reasons why you have invited me here is because I'm sure you have a lot of curiosity on what we do and why we do and how we do. And of course, then thereafter is the importance of design or automotive design. This is the structure of my presentation. So we'll talk of all these things. That's the philosophy of our company. Whatever we do has to ascribe to the wow. It's on style, quality and innovation. And our vision is to be a major player in the automotive design and development field and transit to a globally acclaimed OEM. As you probably all know, we are just about to launch our supercar. It's the first of its kind in the developing world, and as I talk to you, there is no such development capability even in countries like China, Russia, Brazil, etc. That's me. I'm a product of Art Center, California. It's the preeminent design school across all car brands. Usually the chief designers of most car companies, leading car companies, are alumni of that school. It's singularly unique, and it really is the Ivy school in that sense. And of course, we have a world record to our credit of having 700 original designs, the ground of which is a huge body of work by any measure. Some of the milestones. So some of the resources and locational facilities, we are the only independent automotive design and development company in the developing world. Usually most design companies are captive of the automakers themselves, and they are not profit centers. But here we are independent, and therefore we have the profit centers across 3 locations. Some of the competencies that we have, basically right from market research to the ability to engineer a car and put it on the road. So this is the revenue stream. Basically, it's divided into 3 sections. One is the standard products, where we invest a substantial amount on programs, and where we feel there will be a sizable market size. Then these custom products, which are one-offs, and then of course the completely built-up units, of which the Avanti is the first one to be rolled out in the next 2 months. The client profile, it's a very dynamic matrix of B2B and B2C. Automotive and non-automotive. Some of the testimonials that we've got, but particularly of interest, you might see on the right-hand side, some comments from Eats Sogama, which is the parent company of Airbus, and the chief of Renault. Some of the bedrock values that we have in the company, which is what has made a company unique and aspirational, is eponymous success, obsessive passion. I tell students that only if you're obsessively passionate about your craft will you really become a success. And therefore passion is gradable. It can have 90%, 95%, 98%. First move advantage, intangible mastering, disruptive USP, dynamic product and customer matrix, this slide I just showed you. Of course, we obsolescence ourselves, paranoia, these are very, very popular programs of ours. So of the larger vans, the main USP of these programs are privacy, entertainment, comfort, ambience and technology. There are some programs on the London taxi which we export. This is on the Nissan Navara. The Ford EcoSport program. The Duster, Renault Duster. This is the Nissan Navara stretch to really have conference kind of seating for 4 people at the back and the rear saloon. The Mercedes Sprinter, a very popular product for high-end businessmen. The Elantra. This is our newest package on the Innova. It's got a whole exterior style and as well as the interior program. As I said, please ask me questions if you have any after this presentation, of course. This is the custom portfolio which tends to be one-offs. Usually these are politicians or film actors who use them. Yeah, thank you. These are largely used by the Indian film industry. These are used by the corporate world largely to ferry their guests, international guests from the airport directly to their plants. Some of the armored custom vehicles. These are some of the projects that we export around the world. This is the original Humvee, the H1. As you can see from the inside, it's a very futuristic package. From the outside is very military, but from the inside is hugely luxurious and very, very futuristic. Some of the replicas that we do. Some Rolls Royces that we exported to England actually is akin to selling ice to an Eskimo. And we get these cars from across the world and we do bespoke body designs and export them. This was our 500th design in 2004. It was the high water mark for our company. Some of the stretches that we do, quite a popular vertical for us. Some vans, Mercedes vans, they are quite popular in Southeast Asia. There are some of the upgradations on the Mercedes S-Class. The whole interior is upgraded to include entertainment and infotainment systems. Some masala tea. The Volkswagen Polo is a two-door coupe. Some SUV, we are going to put this in production in the next couple of years, I guess. This is my personal favorite. It's inspired by the ambassador, and we actually did this program to kind of test ourselves as to how would the ambassador have evolved if the company had kept pace with it. So it kind of, leapfrog 40 years into the future design. This is a Gaia. It's my personal favorite as well. It's on the Evolution, Mitsubishi Evolution 8. Some mid-engine supercars. Some of the specialty vehicles that we make for customers. This is the Tarzan the Wonder Car 2. This movie is going to be released by the end of this year. I'm sure most of you would have seen on television Tarzan the Wonder Car, the first part of the movie. This is the Tarzan the Wonder Car. It's quite a popular film on television. So mobile ATM banks for chain of banks, mobile shops, Computer Academy in wheels. This is the newest expansion. Of course, as I said earlier, that we are now embarking on making our own cars. So we are, as I speak to you now, an OEM in that sense. We are vehicle manufacturers. This is the first car that we have engineered. It's a supercar, battles with the likes of the Ferraris and Lamborghinis of the world. We start delivering this car mid-April to customers in India. This is the TIA. It's second in line of our manufacturing program. I believe this car is here on display at your campus. This is the Aileron SUV. It's a hyper stylish 4-seat convertible SUV, first of its kind in the world. The interior of the SUV. Some of the OEM projects that we've done for global manufacturers. These are images that I'm showing you which have found their way into the public domain. When we do projects for manufacturers, we are not allowed to talk or disclose or even photograph. 95% of the projects, even we don't have photographs. But these are some of the programs that manufacturers have in fact talked about having having partnered with us. This is the Mahindra hybrid concept car. This is a Tata hybrid based on the Venture. Again, the Tata Manza hybrid. This is the Suzuki Ertiga. This is how it started out. This was a 2010. This is the Renault Twizy that we've done for Renault. It's now in production in Europe. It's an electric two-seat. One seat behind the other. This is a project that we did directly for BMW. It's a mini crossover. Of course, this also is in production now. The Chevrolet Beat. What we're showing is a two-door version, but you all probably know that this car is sold in India for the last 5 years, 5-6 years now. The Renault Logan Step. This is sold largely in Europe. This was the high watermark for us. This is the Aston Martin AMV Advantage. This is a breakthrough for our company in 2003. The Revine XG. It's an electric car. The Revine XR. This is of course in production. The Roadster. The Hummer-inspired Bajaj Force Juggernaut and the Mahindra tractor. Thank you. Some of the other verticals, aviation, and this is a Gulfstream jet that we did 2 years back for a customer in Saudi Arabia. It's a whole retrofit on a new Gulfstream. And the civilian version of the military Dhruv HAL aircraft. This is my personal hobby, and every time I get some free time, I dabble into art. Some of the citations from across the world. Sorry, I'm rushing through. Actually, I'm really indisposed and I need to go and rest. Sorry for this. We are quite popular, with our. We have an enviable brand name, and we have almost 3 million people who like us, I guess. Thank you. To be, yeah.
Okay.
So this sorry, this presentation should have actually preceded the earlier one. Nevertheless, this is of how design is very important, not only in other spheres, but of course in the automotive sphere, it's absolutely important. That's one singular reason why you or I would buy a car, is because of the way it looks, interior and exterior, and all things being given are equal. Engineering, performance, fuel efficiency are now standards are given across the world. So this is a very brief presentation on, largely culled from the automotive design background. The design weightage factor of an automobile in most segments is higher than the related factors of reliability and performance. So what it says, actually, most people would buy a car with the way it looks. And you know, to cut through the clutter, manufacturers are forced to create distinct and original designs. Design has more to do with the matters of the heart. We aim to develop vehicles which not only embody technological perfection, but have the power to stir the emotions. In the automotive design centers, the key words used these days are engagement, emotion, and words like these. So some of the quotations of eminent people. Designers are people who think with their hearts. Design is about passion, emotion and attachment. And design is the number one determinant of whether a product service experience stands out or does not. So we've seen over the last century how at some point of time the economies of the world actually transited into very many phases. And like everything else, of course, all the trends are set by the United States. The United States has, for the last couple of years now, entered the creative economies phase, and I believe that the rest of the world will have to follow through the same phase. So somehow this presentation was cut short, but you know, to most of you who probably are not aware that designing a car, it's a very important hierarchy in the pyramid of the entire value chain of the automotive spectrum. It occupies the position right at the top. It's a small position, but right at the top, because that's key to manufacturers selling the car into the future. It usually takes 4 to 5 years to put a car on the road, and about $1 billion. I'm sure most of you know that. 4 to 5,000 crores at least to put a car on the road, and the number one reason why that car would succeed or not is because of design. So design plays an absolute key role in the hierarchy of automotive value chain, and therefore to visit a design center of an automobile major is virtually impossible. It's far easier to visit White House than to visit the design center of some of the car makers. And at any point of time in the world, there are about 5,500 different designs across all segments, sold in the world. And for each of them, at least 10 to 12 iterations have been gone through. So 60 to 70,000 original designs have to be generated every 5 years, and therefore every year about 10,000 new proposals have to be generated by design departments, and from there they freeze it down and cull it down to just one. So it's a very unique profession in that sense. And the worth of a nation is usually measured by the success or the maturity of its auto industry. So having said that, I think I will now close this presentation and invite answers if you have. As I said, I'll be here for the next 10 minutes. I need to leave at 6:45. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for your amazing talk. It was a pleasure listening to you and looking at the wonderful designs. So now we will be having a question and answer session. And if you need to ask any question, just raise your hand and I'll be running towards you.
Hello, sir.
Sure.
So I wanted to ask a question with respect to design.
Sure.
So can you please explain for budding entrepreneurs and designers what is the process of designing a product, and number second, a life lesson with respect to design which we should take care of when we are designing a product in 2 lines.
Okay, a very long question. I'll try to exemplify. My belief and the reason why we succeeded is singularly the product positioning aspect of any product. You must understand who is going to want your product. Design comes at a later date. So it's the ability of a company or of an individual to visualize that product 5 or 10 years hence. Not just from a design perspective, but why would that product be accepted? Because you're going to sink 5,000-6,000 crores in it, and car design is about Futurama. I'll explain to you in a way that the worth of a designer is usually measured in how long his designs are really in demand. So in the automotive industry, if you are able to think 25 years ahead, which not very many people can do, then you are considered an ace. And why 25 years? I'll explain to you is that 5 years from the drawing board to the showroom, 7 years is sold after that, 5 to 12 years. The last production would be 12 years, but the last guy who bought it top management would cull it down to about 10 or 12. Those 10 or 12 would be made into scale models. From the scale models, another 3 to 5 would be culled, and they would make 1:1 scale models. And from there, top management would decide. So it's about from start, it's about 2.5 to 3 years. And then, of course, once the management decides, the engineers get into the act of tooling and things like that. So it's a very, very tedious process. One of the downsides of this process is that for a designer, unlike other designers or other fashion designers like apparel or shoes, you can design something and sell it on the street in a month's time or in 10 days' time. But the automotive designer usually has to wait for 5 years to really get his validation. That's the downside. So you find a lot of designers having burnt out. But I think if you are very obsessively passionate and enthusiastic and you love your craft, you bid your time to that extent. Thank you.
Hello, sir.
Sure.
So here.
Yep.
Sir, I have seen your designs. Means the DC design cars are more of appealing. Means in India we see cars which give pleasure to eyes. Why don't we see muscle cars around? Means there was a contest, but it was not in a production.
See, muscle cars are a bygone era which was in the United States, and I'm sure you are inspired or influenced by a lot of American movies you must have seen of that era. But India is largely a small car market, and The American market is seeing a renaissance of muscle cars, but in India, as I explained to this gentleman earlier, the marketers have to see enough volume to justify their investment. And unless you all have a love affair with a car and increasingly all want to buy muscle cars, you will not see that.
Why Dodge is not in India?
Pardon?
Why Dodge is not in India?
I think it's a question of the business case. They have to make a business case for it to be in India.
Okay. Thank you.
I think high import duties and things like that.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Because of time constraint, this will be the last question.
Hello, sir.
Sure.
I've been extremely impressed by your designs over years. I have one small question.
Sure.
Of lately, you have started manufacturing your own cars. So, no questions about it that you are fabulous at your designs. But what actually pushed you towards entering into the dynamics of manufacturing where a lot of science is involved, like BMW is offering extreme pleasure, driving pleasure, and then there's Toyota who is offering extreme parts quality and all that, you know, all the dynamics of different manufacturers who have their own values in market. So, like, it's a big game to enter.
Absolutely.
What inspired you to get into all this when you're all extremely obsessed about your designs itself and you're doing great at it?
Very good question. I asked myself the same question of late. What prompted me to, get into this act? Two things is when you create an organization which grows at 30-40%, it becomes a beast, and you have to keep feeding the beast. So, it starts from the growth, the need to grow, need to create an institution. And therefore, when it has to grow and you have to write your own destiny and not be dependent on somebody else, you have to dream of designing your own car. And therefore, we thought of this supercar because it created a new segment. It's very clear to us that we will only do cars that a manufacturer will not or cannot do because we simply cannot compete with them. So we are going to be in the niche segment, making 2,000-3,000 cars a year. And therefore we selected the supercar because there is no sports car segment in India per se, primarily because the imports are obsessively expensive. So it creates a market. We are confident that every emerging market in the world, be it the United States, Italy, Japan, there comes an inflection point where the disposable income rises and the youngsters want to have sports cars, but they can never get one because it's never available or it's too expensive. In fact, the idiom of our sports car is we are actually putting the, usually it's you are never able to afford a sports car when you are young. You only are able to afford it when you are old. So for the first time, we think we will be putting that idea on its head by ensuring that you can be young and yet afford a sports car.
Now there's a contradiction to what you have planned and what's happening. You have launched that car at a 10 lakh cheaper rate when like 3 years during the expo.
Sure.
And now it has reached to a scale of 35 lakh somewhere.
That's
Last
true.
time I checked at DC Design Delhi.
That's true.
Now, youngsters hardly plan that long. You know, once I was there to book that car, I came to know that it's now 35, and
Yes.
I said, let me be back after a year or so.
Yes, you're right. The reason is because in 2013 the rupee underwent a huge depreciation, and 35% component of a car is foreign parts. So that was one aspect. Also, every editor in the media has written about the fact that is it not too cheap for 25 lakhs, the kind of car that we give. It's a lot of car for the money. Also, we didn't want to fall into the trap of the Nano. One of the reasons why it failed, or most of the products fail, is because they're considered cheap and therefore are they going to deliver. Now, having said that, we are not planning to stick to 35 also. We want to price the car at least 50-60 lakhs because that's what it has a rightful place. And for your information, the first year production is already sold out. So, you know, we have the luxury, we have to recoup our investments. I must confess that we ended up with 3 times the cost as we envisaged, 3 times the energy that we envisaged, and almost 1.5 times the time. So obviously, a lot of dynamics got changed along the way, and that's the reason.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So one more question here.
Sure.
You're an inspiration to automotive design industry today.
Thank you.
And I really admire your sporty nature. So I have this doubt. During your startup, when DC started up, why did DC choose to redesign the cars instead of building up their own cars?
Where would I get the money to build my own cars?
Sir, that's what you're very sporty, sir. You are in the market to prove yourself like you're a better designer when compared to the other industry people. After 10 years of your startup, then you started building your own cars. Why did it happen like that?
No. See, I think it's very clear that when you are starting something like that, which is so unique in the country, you need to build credibility. You need to build a portfolio. And there's simply no way that you have enough money to burn to build your own portfolio. So we use customizing as a route where you would come to us and I would design a car for you and use that as a portfolio. Therefore, in the past, we never did cars that did not excite us. We never repeated cars because subconsciously our motive was to use it as a portfolio. And it's only at a certain, it's over the period of time that you build capital, you build reserves, and therefore your balance sheet is able to take those risks, and banks are able to give you debt. All of you probably know that it's horrendously expensive to build a car. The Avanti program, we have spent 150 crores, which is peanuts, absolute peanuts from an automotive industry point of view. But we have done it because of a very, very passionate workforce who work 18-20 hours, and because we were developing cars for across world manufacturers, we acquired the domain knowledge at somebody else's cost. We acquired the profits and we plowed it back to create our own car. So it takes time.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so with this, we'll conclude this talk. So thank you, sir.
Sorry, as I said, I was not in my elements as usually I am, highly indisposed. Sorry. Thanks.